Greetings and welcome to Change the World. This is the show where we interview people who are exploring big, bold solutions to some of that multiplicity of problems that we know is going on in the world. And tonight it's my delight to have Samantha Letourneau as my guest.
Hello.
From the Immigration Settlement Society. I got that wrong, haven't I?
Yeah, the Multicultural Society.
Multicultural Society.
Yes, yeah.
Sam is, as well as working with newcomers and people coming to Canada, she's a musician, a dance artist,
Yes.
a yogini, a facilitator of change, of discussion. So you just come straight from work.
I did, yes.
What was the highlight of your day today?
What was the highlight of my day today? Wow, big question. I think it's today was when a family came to me that I've been trying to help to get their other family that is still in Jordan here, which is a long process. And the woman in particular saying that she trusted me and she knows that I'm here trying to help. So
does the whole family come from Jordan?
Yeah, this is one of the families that have come from Jordan, originally from Syria.
Right.
And they have family members still in Jordan. It's a really long process to try and get them here.
So they might have been in Jordan for a year or longer?
Absolutely. And they're not here. We're at the very beginning process, right. and how long that might take, we could be looking at 5 years, 10 years, we don't know. But just knowing that she appreciates the help that we are providing, really, that gratitude goes a long way.
So you're basically the front smile and welcoming, you and your people, your colleagues are the front door entrance with a big smile to all the newcomers arriving in Nanaimo to make Canada their home, right?
They've either chosen to come here or they've come here because of various circumstances, and we are the first point of contact when they arrive to help them settle in Nanaimo or other parts of Central Vancouver Island.
We're just going back to the beginning of their journey. We look at the first slide I got up here. It's just, what does this image speak to you about?
I think it demonstrates what a tough journey, both physically and mentally, it takes for refugees to come here and how much they've had to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with people personally, heart to heart.
Mm-hmm. How
much do you see that trauma and difficulty continuing as they arrive in a totally new society?
It's, everybody's unique and different perspectives and how they view their situation here, but there is definitely that part of that feeling of loss, that something's been left behind, that the life they've lived is not here, and having to adapt and change to a new way of living. And so there is that. I think all of them kind of hold that, trying to figure out how to live in this new community.
So what are the most important skills that you and your team are drawing on?
Our personal skills?
Yeah, your personal skills. What's happening inside your own hearts?
Well, I think I'm really fortunate that I work with incredibly compassionate and empathetic people that truly are very authentic in the work they're doing and wanting to make positive change for many of the newcomers that arrive here. And so I couldn't ask for anything better.
And what about the people of Nanaimo, the welcoming community as a whole? How are you finding?
Yeah, we've been so fortunate, and I extend large gratitude to so many people in the community, whether they're volunteers with the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society or in general, they're just doing it out of the graciousness of their heart of really making Syrian refugees and other refugees that have arrived here feel welcome and included, supported, like an extended family. And I think Nanaimo's been really exceptional in that.
So let me just go to the next image. What does this say to you?
What does that say to me?
She's just arrived from, she's a young Syrian child.
Yeah, there's a sparkle in her eye. There's a sense of hope, I think, right? And hope's always a tricky one because
what I see here is the absolute simple normalness of being human.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's any child.
Yeah.
And there's no racial, cultural, religious
nothing.
spin.
Exactly.
It's just a human saying, here I am, right?
Yeah.
But then the next image I've got is one that was brought up. The fear that some people have.
Right. Yeah.
And recently, because of the election of Donald Trump in America, we're seeing people feeding on that fear and amplifying it and building on it.
Yeah, I think we see an acceptance for that type of fear when we see an individual like Donald Trump elected.
Yeah.
It gives that acceptance to discriminate, to be racist, to allow those fears to be reality when they shouldn't be. And so, yeah, you see a rising in those thoughts that have no legitimacy to them at all.
Where does it come from? What's going on inside people? Are you in contact with that? Do you meet the people who are more nervous and afraid that people are coming in and going to bring terrorism? And
yeah, I've heard comments like that, yep, I've heard comments like that, and I've heard unfortunate racist comments being made, and I think in some ways it is a lack of awareness or a lack of wanting to be aware. There's a fear that's held within that, this common thing that we've heard in North America, that they're coming to take our jobs, these ideas, and how to dispel that and encourage people to actually get to know someone on a human level and to connect with them is part of that work, but it's really hard work. And when someone is so rooted in that fear, and maybe it comes from upbringing or who knows.
Some of it's purely upbringing, and some of the economic insecurity of people who are more vulnerable about getting a job, and they're struggling with unemployment anyway.
Exactly.
And they're finding it hard to get a job. And
yep, and they're living in tight economic times. It's hard for them to find work. It's hard for them to find affordable housing. Why are we bringing these people here to add to this? Why isn't Canada putting money into what we need, right? Instead of understanding the economic benefits that new people bring from other countries here, the skills that they bring, the insights that they bring, the richness, all of that, right?
So one of the arguments going on in America at the moment, and this relates to this thing, is that the Democrats who are supporting free trade, because they're thinking free trade and globalization were good for the cultural elites, good for the professionals, good for the lawyers, good for the business people, good for those who've got money already, who often write in the newspapers and do the media thing.
Yeah.
And for the people who are doing a 9-to-5 job all the time, who haven't got college degrees, they're the ones losing out. And the Democrats never spoke to them. And the Trump he said they felt he's got my back.
That's right.
And so there's a deeper origin to what we see as racism or nativism in deeper insecurities.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And that fear of, that fear, I guess, I don't want to say of the unknown, but that fear of to justify that fear, like where does that come from, and to have someone in a position of that power now, to be the President of the United States and saying that's acceptable, we see a rise in irrational behavior.
Yeah. So I mean, in this show, we're trying to look at the big, bold ideas, and I learned recently that in Norway, when they have new immigrants come in, they give them a whole year on benefit to learn English. To learn Norwegian.
Yeah, which is wonderful.
And then they will actually find a community to sponsor them where there's work, right?
Great.
And furthermore, because Norway is a very small community, had to buy into globalization, they had to do the free trade thing.
Right.
When a company has to shut down because of free trade, all the workers who are still unionized get 90% of their pay for the full next year and are helped to find a new job. And the government helps firms to develop new firms. So you get the feeling that the government and capitalism are working for you on your side. And often in North America, you get the feeling they're not.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really clever design, and I like the emphasis on them learning the language in that area. And we also stress that with many newcomers where English is their additional language or they're just learning English, to really take that first year, to take that time to learn the language, because it's going to benefit them. It's going to benefit them economically, but socially as well, in connecting with people in the community.
So when I first came as an immigrant to Canada, I couldn't have had an easier run because I grew up speaking English. Everyone speaks English here. It was like sliding in, easy done.
Yes.
And so I haven't had the more challenging experience of being Latvian or being Eritrean or being Jordanian, having to deal with a whole new language and not knowing what the street sign is saying, and it must be pretty confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that either, but yeah, I mean, it must be incredibly confusing, and also different ethnicity and being judged based on your skin color. I mean, that's the reality of what happens in this world, unfortunately.
Yeah.
People are still judged on the color of their skin, and we still see people being frowned upon because of that, or comments being made. And so on top of that, you don't have the language skills, and then you're being judged because of either the fear because you're a Muslim and you must be a terrorist, or, oh, you look different than the rest of us here.
So what about in school? I mean, I saw some data recently that showed that the more a school is multiracial, the less bullying there is.
I think I would agree with that,
So what's it like in the schools here in Nanaimo for the children of the newcomers?
Well, we've been really fortunate. The school district has been wonderful in working with us and has created a welcome center that's based at Fairview. Now, it's not part of Fairview School, but it's where they found room. And Fairview itself is an incredibly diverse community school in this area. So it's a great place to have it. And the children get to work on their language skills first and feel comfortable in that, and then move into schools within their catchment area. And the principals and teachers are all trying to understand more about their culture and to work with them and to be supportive of the families. And so I think here we've been really fortunate in how the school district has come together with us, how community members have come together in really wanting to create an inclusive community.
The other minority, when I first came to Canada, I was shocked at how much the First Nations people were really sidelined.
Yes.
That in Victoria, I've almost never saw a First Nations person in a shop, in a bookshop, in a restaurant, serving, like just on the streets.
Yeah.
So is there a place where the newcomers meet with First Nations to discuss their shared experience of prejudice and discrimination?
Yeah, that would be lovely, and it is something I'm looking into, and I have done projects like that in the past with Nanaimo First Nation, working with newcomers and with elders of Nanaimo and elders sharing the stories of the land, so that newcomers that come here understand whose territory we're on and the significance of it and the history.
When I came to Canada and you do your immigration test,
yeah,
it was just the Canadian version of Kings and Queens, really.
Right.
You know, I had to learn, along with other Canadians, about what had gone on. I mean, in Oak Bay in Victoria, there was a lot of native settlements, and there wasn't a single signage. There was no signage anywhere. Now, because volunteers have stepped up, this signage saying this was a First Nations village. Mm-hmm. And to realize that people lived on the land for 10,000 years changes the cultural context that all of us are newcomers. Like some of us came here 200 years ago, you're coming from Jordan 2 months ago.
That's right. We're not from this territory, and those are lovely projects to work on, because I think that's truly where reconciliation happens, in understanding the history, the true history of this land, and building authentic relationships with Indigenous communities. And there have been some phenomenal projects done in Vancouver, for example, with refugee youth and Indigenous youth, where they actually use cameras to share stories. So it's called a photo voice, and they would take pictures that explain experiences of how they feel with a narrative, and they work on it together. And within that, they find commonalities and similarities in their perspectives, but also different challenges that they've encountered. And that really builds a better understanding of where each person is coming from.
And to the extent that in school, kids don't know about each other's backgrounds or anything. They're just relating immediately person to person.
Yeah. And often on what they see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are the First Nations kids in the schools where the newcomer children are coming to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so hopefully there's a bonding happening, that they'll be playing in hockey teams later on and basketball teams and doing arts projects together. And
yeah, sure, that would be great.
Starting businesses together.
maybe. Yeah, that would be, I think there's a lot of room to do programming with Indigenous communities and with newcomers here, and I think there could be more funding in place to do education around that and design curriculums around that and programming, etc.
If you had a magic wand and the federal government said, I'm going to give you $1 million, and the Nanaimo Council was on board and the staff were on board and everyone was on board, what really needs to happen? What's your biggest frustration of what you'd like to do that you can't do at the moment?
That's a big question.
I didn't pre-warn you with that one.
Yeah, you didn't. Well, I am a really strong believer in people understanding whose territory we're on and really understanding, as I'm repeating myself here, the history of that. And I think it would be, and we're seeing that actually with the Canada Council, where money has gone into the Canada Council for the Arts for non-Indigenous and Indigenous artists to work together. And this is unique. This hasn't happened before, or at least not this much money being put towards those types of initiatives. And I think the same could be happening with immigrant services, working with local First Nation communities and designing programs together that really build a collective understanding so that these are authentic relationships. I think that's where you start to break down the racism and discrimination that exists, because often what will happen is newcomers will hear racial comments being made about Indigenous people, or they'll be warned to watch out for them or be careful, and really, we want to prevent that or stop that from happening from the beginning, so that they have a clear understanding that this Indigenous people, you don't fear them just as we don't fear Muslims as being terrorists, right? And so I think there's a lot of room for additional programming that is looking at creating more dialogue between both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
I'm myself working on a whole new book on the economics of kindness, and so I'm looking at the underlying assumptions behind our whole economy, and it struck me that there are some deep cultural assumptions.
Yes.
All of them framed in operating in a society with hierarchies of dominance, like all humans are superior to animals and nature.
Yeah.
All white people are superior to colored people.
Right.
All males are superior to women.
Yes.
All straight males are superior to gay males. All males,
white men.
white men. All men with property are superior to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And now we're moving into a partnership culture.
Yeah.
When we're saying all men and women respect each other, all people of color respect each other, we respect animals and nature. And so this sense of, within childhood, sometimes you pick up on hierarchy. Mm-hmm. You pick up on, we can bully them because they're lower than us. And it's an ancient impulse, and to turn the whole of our living into a partnership way of living.
Yes, it's far more, I think, far more.
It's a huge change.
It's a big change, and it's more productive, and it's more beneficial to everyone, and a lot healthier. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we look at the arts, I got an image here of just some children. You can see it on the far screen, I hope. Can you? Is it not showing up yet? It's a bronze of children playing, just expressing some of the freedom of childhood. And then I've got a second one here, which is, you can see that one now, it's showing up. What's happening here that what's this say to you?
What does that say to me? I love the expression on the woman's face with the big smile, and you see children diving in and creating work together. There's this collective energy that they are producing a piece of work together. Right. And with that, I think comes the sharing of stories with each other, and a comfort to talk to each other because you're creating together.
One thing that's just struck me, they're all drawing stick people, right?
Yes, yeah.
But if you go back to the Neolithic times and the caves, when we all put our hand up, right, and you blow paint, you blow paint onto it, pigment, it's almost like as fundamental as that. Here we are, we're humans. They're saying, I'm here, and expressing it artistically together.
Yeah, I think there's something really beautiful when people work on some kind of art project together, and you don't have to be a professional artist to do that. I think there is something that brings us in more of a safe environment to express how we're feeling, because we have a medium in front of us that we're using to express that, instead of just maybe face-to-face and speaking. Yeah. We have another way to share our feelings.
And certainly when I've done a little bit of art, your whole psyche gets immersed in another realm.
That's right. You become really present in what you're
and
creating.
you forget your ego and your personality and all that sort of stuff. You're a being person and not a doing person, right?
Yeah, that's right. You're really in that moment. Yeah. And within that moment, I think a lot of reflection happens in the process of making something, what you're thinking and what you're going to do next. It's just unfolds.
So do you find that you've got newcomers who've probably never done art before? They've been in a camp in Jordan or living in Eritrea. Is it the first time they've had expression through art?
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, there's been experiments happening with different refugee camps where actually theater is happening in the camps, and they're doing plays together. Yeah, quite interesting. There's a dance therapist that I've just forgotten her name, who actually goes into refugee camps and does work through dance. So these things are starting to emerge. I think they're relatively new, but totally beneficial.
So are we going to see, in a year's time, possibility that you're organizing a group of newcomers and they're at the Port Theatre putting on some sort of...
Yeah, we've done it before.
You've done it before?
We've done it before. It was a show called Harmonies of Faith.
Okay.
And it was about 150 performers.
Wow.
Yep, and we brought together diverse faith groups that are maybe not so well understood. So Muslims, paganism, Baha'i, a whole bunch of different faith groups that came together to put this performance on at the Port Theatre, and each of them talked about or performed what compassion means in their faith and where the similarities are.
So you're also a dancer, right?
Yes.
Or as I should say in Canadian, a dancer.
Sure.
Have you had any chance to do dance with newcomers?
No, I'd love to, but no, I haven't.
It's one of waiting to happen, right?
Yeah, it's something I'd like to do or explore with them. We've done what we did start recently was a knitting group for women. Many of the women that have come from Syria do enjoy knitting, and we've also found with our other clients that access our services, the women they like knitting or crocheting or something like that, and that has been hugely successful in building relationships with diverse groups of women.
Yeah. So I'm going to a final image here, which is another group of people who are marginalized and pushed out, which is the gay community.
Oh, yeah.
And this is from a gay pride in Toronto. And I've read that some of the people coming in from the Middle East have prejudices against, homosexual relationships. Do you find, is this something that comes up? Is it discussed? Is it, because young men, they've got to go through the whole learning of what it means to overcome those deep, visceral prejudices. Yeah,
I mean, that's an interesting question. I haven't heard anything about that come up. It doesn't mean that it won't. It is a reality of prejudice against sexual orientation. I mean, it exists here. Yes. And sometimes that's why a person comes here seeking refugee status. That can be the situation.
Because when I grew up in a straight family, when gayness was just never talked about, when you begin to learn about it, it's all in the shadows, and it was dark and something out there, and so inherently there's a distrust and uncertainty because you just don't know what it's all about.
Right. Yeah. And
it's only when you discover friends and it becomes totally normalized. It's really love.
Yeah.
But the cultural journey that people have to go through to come to full embrace and acceptance of all our different means of loving and expressing ourselves.
Yeah, it's a long journey. It's a lot of work, and a lot of opening up our hearts and being willing to listen and to question our own judgment that we hold. We all hold some type of judgment, and I think that's the awareness that every human being can work on, is where is that judgment coming from, and why am I thinking this before actually fully embodying that, maybe questioning it.
So my experience is that with that releasing of preformed ideas and the opening, the kind of melting of the heart that goes on, it's like you feel your heart opening. It's a widening of your emotional realm, which leads to a much fuller understanding of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're more open. You're taking in more of what's coming to you instead of being closed.
And so, what would you like if there are people watching this show, if they haven't switched off already, who are saying, "I'm really uncertain about all these newcomers coming to Canada, and we should have a cultural test." What would you say to them directly in relation to that heart opening and the the wider acceptance of new people who are different from different cultures.
What would I say to them?
Yeah, if you had a chance, they're watching you on television right now, so you speak to the camera and say, this is my experience. What would you say?
Oh, it's such a good question. What would I say? I think it's just, oh boy. I think I would say, just even the simplest thing to do, like let's just say hello to somebody and reach out and get to know them and try and challenge what you're feeling within, and really just take a chance and say hi.
Yeah.
Push yourself out of your comfort zone and meet somebody new.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're winding up now because time is running out on us. What inspires you most to do this kind of work in your life and to have your profession around this?
What inspires me? Well, I don't like being bored.
You can do 1,000 different jobs with that. So is there some deeper thing that's going on?
Well, sure. I mean, I constantly want to also become more aware. And this type of work is really eye-opening, and it is very challenging. And your perception and how you view the world is always changing. And so the willingness of me becoming more open is why I do this work.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show
together.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
This has been Change the World. My name is Guy Dauncey. This is the book I've written, which is my vision of changing the world, called Journey to the Future. And join us next week when we'll have more explorations of the kind of vision that we need to create a world richer, more beautiful, deeper, better, and generally more wonderful. Thank you.